Today we're here with Severyn AshKenazy, a Polish citizen who experienced war from his earliest days, hiding from the Germans as they invaded, affected by the Russians as they invaded and kicked the Germans out, lived through Poland through the communist period, left, went to other countries, and came back to try to help to reestablish Jewish life in Poland. A person with a history that many Holocaust survivors have shared, and fortunately we have him here today to tell us about his personal experiences, how it shaped him, and the things that he has done to try to make life better in a world that passed through a very dark period. What was your life like, as you remember, at the earliest stages when you were maybe 5, 6 years old, or do you remember before that, where you were? What was your home life like?
Well, I was born in a town that was called Tarnopol and was in Poland. Today, the same city is called Ternopil and is in the Ukraine. I was born in 1936, and I do remember a few moments of pre-war, where we were nicely dressed, where we had a ñaña, where my mother insisted in speaking French to us. It seemed like a wonderful life. We would go to the country, we would travel a little bit with my brother, who was 3.5 years older, and my parents. I have these vignettes in my mind, the pictures of a fairly happy life as a child, as a very young child. It, of course, changed after the war. During the war, after the war was declared in 1939, the Russians came in. I remember quite a bit at that time. We had to be resettled, to move into another town, where we lived for a year and a half. And then when the Germans attacked Russia, we went back to that town, to Tarnopol, and then rapidly it deteriorated to where we ended up in the ghetto. My grandmother owned a fairly large building in that area of Tarnopol, and we were able to get a large room for the 4 of us.
So you were moved from first the Russians, and then you were moved when the Germans came back to the town, and then you were placed in a ghetto when they took control. Is that what happened?
Right, within a relatively short period of time.
And how old were you, if you recall, when you went into the ghetto?
I was 5 years old.
And your family members were with you, your mother, your father?
Yes, my parents, my brother, the 4 of us ended up in the ghetto.
And that was still Ukraine, or was that Poland?
That was no longer anything. That was a geography occupied by the Germans. Whatever the Germans called it, that's what it was.
And what was life like in the ghetto at that point, as you remember it?
It was sort of both empty, because there were no schools to go to. It was mostly at home. It was, I remember, little laughter, mostly sadness, fear instilled in us. I remember moments where something called akcja happened, and that meant that the Germans would, together with the Jewish police and with the Ukrainians who helped them, move into the ghetto and catch as many Jews as they could to send whoever knew where at the time. We had no idea. Later we understood that they were sent to death camps and were exterminated or were shot outside of town. And in 1942, we ended up in a cellar, under a cellar, of a home owned by Polish Catholics with whom my father made an arrangement where he would pay them some money. They would hide us and feed us. And we were there for almost 2 years.
Was that in the ghetto, or was that?
It was outside of the ghetto. It was in the Aryan area, outside of the ghetto. So we had to flee the ghetto to get to there, to that house, and then hide.
Taking a step back, what kind of home life did you have?
You mean before the war? My father was a prominent businessman, well off. Part of the community. My grandfather was an alderman in the courts. He was someone extremely well respected. My father was a chemist by profession, amateur mathematician, spoke several languages well, fluently. My parents spoke German at home. My mother attempted most of the time to speak French to us, already at that time, because she wanted us to be better educated than most.
Was she French?
No, she was Francophone. She had learned French when she was a young girl, and spoke it apparently quite well. Well, I know she spoke it well because we ended up going to France where she was practically fluent. And then very rapidly, her French rivaled the French of French people. So did ours, as a matter of fact, so did mine. So going back to Tarnopol, we had a comfortable life. And we lived, I told my children that we lived in the nicest building on the nicest street in Tarnopol. And of course, children, ha, ha, ha. But then I took them there. And it is still the nicest building on the nicest street. And we arrived there a few years ago, and who had my father's store? Pierre Cardin. So that was very cute, you know, that it was the prominent clothing store in Tarnopol ended up being in our store. As a matter of fact, whenever the city of Tarnopol is advertised, our building is sure to be shown because it was rather an exceptional location and very nice.
Did you have non-Jewish friends when you were young as well as Jewish before the invasion by the Nazis or the Germans?
That I don't remember. Of course, in the ghetto there were no Christian children. Although we were able to, on the peripheries of the ghetto, to meet some children who were not Jewish, but the memory is very vague. And none of the children we knew with whom we played in the ghetto survived. And out of a Jewish population of about 18,500 Jews, some 150 survived, and we were the only family unit to survive. Father, mother, children. In the ghetto, you ask me how was life in the ghetto. It was, for a 5-6-year-old, eventually uneventful. For instance, one of the excitements we had was to watch somebody die from hunger. So children would call and say, well, at the next street or the street down the hill, there is somebody that we think is going to die. So we would go, and it was a death watch of someone who was dying, and that was our entertainment. So just to imagine what that life was. And the way a person dies from hunger is that the person swells in the last hours. Swells, and then bursts, and water runs out, and the person is dead. So that's what we as children could see.
Pretty black memories.
Yes, though I keep them away. I don't think about it. It's not. It's hard to think about it. So you try to get away from it. The recurring dream where this used to appear disappeared over the years. I used to have a dream where someone was chasing me and about to stab me or shoot me or hit me. That dream also lately has not come back, but so for years it was.
How long were you in the ghetto? How many, a year or less?
In the ghetto we were, it seems, a year or so, a year before we went into hiding. When the Germans came to Tarnopol, they were already well organized to eliminate this Jewish population. And it was also a miracle, because we would hide in a place in the building where we were living, and on that occasion, my father was working for the Germans as a food chemist outside the ghetto. And my mother was with us, and she decided to take us into another hiding place in the hospital. And that day they discovered the place where we were hiding and took everyone, including our cousins, that we never saw again, and we survived.
Did you wear any armbands that identified you as Jewish people, or was that?
No, my parents did. Even my brother was 3.5 years older did, but I didn't. I was a little child, and they didn't require that of the very little ones. Yeah.
So when the hiding began, can you describe exactly how life was?
Well, first of all, it was a cellar, a sub-cellar, a cellar under a cellar. It was 6 feet wide, 12 feet long, and about 6 feet tall. And at first there were 4 of us living there, which my mother, my brother, myself, and my mother's uncle. My parents decided that they would try to save a family member from each side. So my mother took her father's brother with us. Her father had already been killed. And my father took a cousin of his to be with us. So at first we were 4 with my uncle, and then a few months later we were joined by my father, his cousin, a doctor, and his wife. My father wanted a doctor with us in case there were medical problems.
So when did he stop working for the Germans? You said he was a chemist for the Germans.
He was a food chemist. He was in charge of preserving their foodstuffs. And the reason we, at least the children, had food is because they allowed him to take some food. His supervisor, German supervisor, allowed him to put some things in his pocket when he would leave work of the foodstuffs they had. So at least the children didn't go hungry. My parents did go hungry more than once. They were going to liquidate the ghetto. And the last day, somehow they got wind of the fact that that day they were going to liquidate the ghetto, which had become more of a work camp after they had killed the children and the wives of the women who could not work. Then they decided to kill those who remained, who were workers. And on that day, my father fled in a very dramatic fashion.
You say liquidate, you mean shot them?
Yeah, right. Put them, I mean, transport them to death camps, you know.
What was that?
42. Actually, it was end of 41, beginning 42.
So the space you were in was described as pretty small.
Middle 42. It was small, and almost we were there, 8 of us, for almost a year, until the Russians came and liberated that town in March, April 42. So that's what it was. It was a monotonous life.
In 1942, the Russians liberated.
44.
44.
1944. Then we came out of the ghetto. My father went to work for the Russians. He was a man who was needed. He was a mathematician. He was physically very strong, energetic. He was very bright. He was a chemist by training. And the Russians ended up using my father to adjust their artillery to the calculations that my father would make. And therefore we would advance with the Russian army because he was needed.
And where did they go? They were occupying, you're talking about your town where you...
They eventually freed town of Poland, then they marched on to Lemberg or Lwów or Lviv today, which was one of the, I guess, 3 largest towns of the then Poland. So we ended up in Lwów, and then they marched on to Krakow. We ended up in 45, early 45, late 44 in Krakow, towards the end of the war. We lived in Krakow for a period of time, and in 1946 we escaped. My father had become a diplomat for the Polish government. He was not a member of the Communist Party. He was never interested in joining anything, not the Jewish Judenrat during the war, although he was always invited to join whatever organizations they were. He did not join neither the Judenrat in the ghetto nor the Communist Party, but he was a businessman and he was useful and he was needed, and he always had a job. He was always employed. We ended up fleeing to France, where we stayed for the next 10 years.
How did you travel to France?
By train. By train through Katowice. We had diplomatic passports, so we were able to flee. At first the children, my brother and I. My mother came back, and then she, with my father, crossed the river to Czechoslovakia, then today the Czech Republic. They stayed in Prague for a while, and then they joined us in France. We were given to an orphanage that the Rothschild family established outside of Paris, called Malmaison, I believe. It's a community town called Malmaison, and the orphanage was there. My uncle was a student of medicine, my mother's brother, in Paris. So he took care of us a little bit, as much as a young student could. Then my parents came. My father opened a business, and successful, worked hard. And in 1946, we decided to come to the United States. And directly, practically, to Los Angeles, because my parents were here before, and they decided that Los Angeles would be a a good place.
And how old were you in 1946?
I was 10. 1946, I was 10. Then when we came to the United States, I was 20, turning on to 21. You ask me, when the Germans invaded, what we by then were in a town some 80 kilometers, which would be probably 50, 60 miles from Tarnopol, the town, which was really our town, where my parents knew everyone and most people knew them. Then when the Germans attacked, my father hired a little truck, driven, of course, by a driver. We were in the back, going to Tarnopol, and then planes were coming over our heads, and one plane came down to a point where we could see the pilot. And that he didn't bomb us or shoot us is a miracle. He probably saw children and had some heart and didn't shoot us. But they occupied that part of Poland and throughout the Russians very, very rapidly. So we didn't really see fighting. Poland was by then defeated, divided between the Germans and the Russians, and therefore the Polish army did not exist. So it was between the Germans and the Russians, and the Germans at what they called the Blitzkrieg moved so fast that within days practically they were at our doorsteps.
You spoke of fear, that much of your early days were blended with fear that were overwhelming you. How can you speak a little bit more about that, because that sounds like it's
unless you experience it, it is just a concept for anyone. I've spoken to a lot of people. I asked them, do you understand what fear is? And most of the people I speak with or mention it have no idea what fear is. Fear is, fear for your life is very rapidly embedded into you. And any noise could be an enemy noise. The nights were frightening. Mornings were frightening because the actions, the so-called selection days where they would actually cordon off the ghetto and ruthlessly move into any room and take people out, and the screams of children and of people. It's hard to describe. I go to movies and they try to imitate what it was, but it seemed to me that it was always worse than the scariest movies that portrayed fear show. So fear becomes like hunger. It's with you. It doesn't stop. It doesn't recede. It occupies your entire being, and very rapidly, as a child, you understand that you have to be quiet, that you have to be nice, that you have to be invisible, and that you have to cuddle and love and be with your parents, because you never know what could happen in the next minute, not day or hour, minute. So unless you've experienced it, it is just a concept. We experienced it.
For a short time, you were a child, free to be a child, you mentioned early, and then you went into a cycle of fear until you were, what, 10 years old or 12 years old?
Until really it subsided in France. It subsided in somehow after the war was over in 45 for a period of time, but then my father was arrested by the communist government, and we went through some hellish times as well. And it's not until we came to France and my brother and I went to the to this orphanage, although we were not orphans, that fear so dissipated rather rapidly. In France it dissipated. We had dreams, we had nightmares, but no fear. We went to school. Life became normal rather rapidly.
The part of your shaping years were full of fear.
Yes, yes. From, I would say, from the age of 5 till the age of 9.5, 9. It was even fear after the war, where in Krakow, my brother and I, we would go to a school. We, as Jews, we were discriminated by other children, by the teachers. We were Jews who, who had been diminished and no longer really belonged to humanity from the point of view of the Christians. We were different. And we could easily be intimidated and beaten up and by other children who had been raised in anti-Semitic families.
During that entire period, outside of, I guess, the people who provided a hiding place in exchange for money, was there anybody that you met, either German or Polish or Ukrainian or any of those groups that were not Jews that were your friends or helped you?
As soon as we went into the cellar, into what we called bunker, there were no other people we would see other than the family, the husband, the wife, daughter, and the son, who were teenagers. We did not know any, there was no possibility to meet anyone else. And I only spent one night in the 2 years outside of the cellar. They took me one night upstairs, so my mother insisted that I breathe fresh air. So I spent most of the night looking at the moon. But that was the life. We were. It was a life of fear, a life that did not assure us of a tomorrow. There basically was no tomorrow for us, and we learned a lot. My mother kept teaching us. My father kept teaching us. I learned how to play chess quite well. And then we would read and reread many of the same stories. We had books. And strangely enough, I remember we even had humor. It was strange, but we had humor. There were jokes told by the older people who were with us. Most of these jokes we laughed at, but we didn't understand them. We understood them years later. But everyone laughed. We also laughed.
Was there a Jewish community in terms of synagogue and a religious community in the town where you grew up, or were you a part of that? Or not?
Before the war?
Yes.
Oh, before the war, there were, as I mentioned, 18,500 Jews, and we were very much part of that community, and there wasn't a Shabbos where we wouldn't have 12.5 people, maybe more. I remember very long table. Of course, I was little, so everything seemed bigger than it probably really was. But I remember a lot of people Friday nights, relatives, friends, people who were traveling through, Jews who were traveling through the town, always people, and the Jewish home, you know. My grandparents had already died from natural causes by the time I was born. So I didn't have my grandparents with me on my father's side. And I later remember spending a little time with my mother's father. Her mother had died when she was young. And he, I remember, was just wonderful, you know, just wonderful.
Was there any fear when the communists took over where you were?
After the war or before the war? Because they came twice. After the war, we didn't quite understand. We didn't understand what was really going on. Father was apolitical. He was a businessman. Proceeded in doing business. And he was asked by his acquaintances from before the war. I'm not sure they were friends. One was Minister of Foreign Affairs. The other one was Minister of Commerce. Their names was Minz and Schir, and they sent for him from Warsaw to Krakow and ordered him to be a diplomat, gave him diplomatic passports and gave him tasks. So it was, we had a fairly comfortable, again, life was comfortable. We had a beautiful apartment in one of the nicest buildings in Krakow, who to this day is one of the nicer buildings in Krakow. And we went to school. We ate well, except for we had no Christian friends, and very few. I only remember one person who I befriended, whose name was also Severyn at the time, with whom I had some relationship. He ended up going to Israel, and I've never seen him since. He was older than I. He passed away years ago.
So many Jewish people, didn't they return to Poland after the war and found that they were unwelcomed?
Well, I did not. I read about it, I hear about it. We did not experience it. But I understand that about 1,800 Jews were killed by the Poles after the war ended. Of course, this is very painful, but if you consider that 3 million Polish Jews had been killed by the Germans, the fact that almost 2,000 Jews who survived were killed was, of course, tragic and hurtful, but almost not unexpected, as we were dealing with a population that was basically anti-Semitic, jealous of Jews at large in Poland before the war, and very primitive. These, for most part, these people were either illiterate or semi-illiterate. So, of course, it was awful. It was tragic. Not so surprising for me. These people settled comfortably in the homes and in the furnishings of the Jews who had been thrown out, supposedly killed. And then they came back and they wanted their things back from these people who now consider themselves owners, both of the premises and its contents. So it was easy to kill the Jew. And what's the big deal? 3 million were killed. They saw these people being killed, or they understood that they were being killed. One more. For us, very hurtful. Very, very hurtful. But that's how it was. We cannot blame their children and grandchildren. As a matter of fact, we Jews have a law. We cannot blame the children for the crimes of the parents. So we must remember that. I've gone back to Poland, as you know, many times since 1972. It's a different world. Is there anti-Semitism? Of course. But is there anti-Semitism here in Los Angeles? Of course. It is more restrained here because it is not taught widely, yet it exists.
Can you explain how anti-Semitism still exists after the Nazis were defeated?
Anti-Semitism was not invented by the Nazis. We have the Greeks already called the Jews a stiff-necked people in some 300-400 years before Christ. We already were different. We were not going to submit. We were people who prized knowledge, who knew how to read and write. As a matter of fact, to be a Jew, 2 things were required: circumcision and knowledge of language. A Jew had to know how to read, write, and count. If not, he couldn't be a Jew, because the law required him to read from the Bible. And if he couldn't be a Jew. So we were a stiff-necked people. Our God was what guided us. The Greeks, the Romans, the Persians had several gods and several religions and several tendencies in this general area. So they didn't quite understand this absolute devotion to this one God. As a matter of fact, the Greeks considered the Jews to be a very lazy people. They were not very prized as slaves. They were the least desirable slaves because these people required Saturday to pray and not work. The Catholic Church didn't help.
Do you think the Pope, the Polish Pope, helped to try to diminish anti-Semitism in Poland?
Yes, he was a decent human being. He tried. But he had to deal with the hierarchy of the church, and he really didn't succeed in eliminating anti-Semitism. He might have put the Christians on the road to less anti-Semitism, but he wasn't able to eliminate it. When I spoke with priests after the war, and even lately, I did not see much progress in eliminating anti-Semitism. What is fascinating is that here in Los Angeles, I befriended, I'm friends with a Polish woman whose husband is a prominent actor, and I was telling them for years, listen, the church is anti-Semitic and it promotes anti-Semitism. And I say, oh no, we never heard it. Then they invited me to come to church for the 16th, for the confirmation of their 16-year-old daughter. And sure enough, the bishop, because it's such a comfortable community, the bishop himself of this area came to the ceremony, and of course immediately read from the New Testament and the Jews, and Jesus said to the Jews, so that we looked at each other and said, you see, they haven't forgotten us.
Well, given all this anti-Semitism that still is prevalent today, and I want to kind of bring a few things current, how important is the state of Israel to the Jewish people and to the world?
The state of Israel has an extraordinary importance. We feel proud of the state of Israel. We feel proud that the Israelis are so advanced in science, intellectually, and militarily. We are very, very proud. But if you look at the geography of Israel and you see who the neighbors are, if it weren't for the conflict between the Sunnis and the Shiites and other Muslim minorities, I don't see how we could exist in the sea of enemies. As long as they fight among themselves, maybe we have a chance to survive. But if one day they stop surviving and they have the atom bomb and they have sophisticated weapons with the crazy Muslim philosophy, what are the chances we could survive?
Do you think the acceptance of migrants today in Europe is some type of redemption for the Germans as they look to bring people in from war-torn countries, or what do you think of what's going on in terms of the terrorism and jihadism and all of that?
Listen, the Germans are very sensitive when it comes to human rights, even this third or fourth generation after the war. And they are trying to do good. They're really, the Germans, one has to give them credit. They're trying to apologize. They're trying to make amends for what happened during the Second World War. To some extent, they're succeeding. But unless we understand in depth the Muslim world, we cannot make the right judgment. Of course, these are poor people and poor children, and you look at them, you'd like to adopt some of these poor, crying, starving children. But their mullahs, their leaders, have a different plan. This is the Muslims are born from a different need than Judaism or Christianity. Judaism, with its 10 commandments, is a universal religion. Although our Orthodox Jews discriminate against the non-Jews to some extent, but no one says we should enslave the non-Jews, and no one says we have to convert or kill the non-Jews. We are just saying, well, the Jews deserve to be saved first, to be helped first. And we were given the 10 Commandments because we're obviously savages, and we needed some rules. The 10 Commandments became then our ethics, or other commandments, since we have over 600. The Muslims, on the other hand, as compared to Judaism and Christianity, which is a form of Judaism. Let us not forget the Christian and the Jews want to forget where Christianity came from. Well, Christianity was a reformation of Judaism at the time. As a matter of fact, for the first 50 or 100 years, if you weren't circumcised and you were not a Jew, you could not become a Christian. This is how close Christianity derived from Judaism. The Muslims, on the other hand, have a totally different reason for its existence. In the new era, in that part of the world, these people produced very little. They practically lived from thievery, from attacking other people and stealing from them. It was unsafe for the caravans to cross that part of the world because they were attacked and robbed.
What year was this, are we talking?
This was the first 4 centuries of our era, 5 centuries of our era. Muhammad's idea was to say, listen, why do we steal from one another? If we unite, look at this whole world, Europe, Asia, other countries. Rather than robbing from one another, we can rob from the rest of the world. And he created this organization of robbers who, with this aggressive religion, who attacked the rest of the world to rob it. As a matter of fact, the Muslims ask, why do you look at us as assassins? First of all, we look at you as assassins because you've invented the world. It comes from hashish. Your people were drugged when they were sent to murder the rest of the world. That's why they are called assassins, from hashish. They used drug for warfare long before anybody else did. The other part is that they really have not contributed much to this world. There was a Renaissance. There was architecture. They robbed the world to such an extent that, yes, they were rich. For a while, they promoted the idea that they brought the concept of mathematics and geometry. Nonsense. They stole it from India when they invaded India and brought it back to the Muslim world. They did not invent the concept of zero. Yet if you speak with a Muslim, oh yes, we gave the concept of zero to the world. Absolutely not. And what is the net result of these robbers? Where do they find themselves in the 20th century? They represent 1/4 of the world's population. They have non-peace Nobel Prize laureates, non-peace, because peace, Arafat got a peace Nobel Prize. I mean, it's nonsense. Non-peace, I believe they have the Muslims, the real Muslims. There are 3 Nobel laureates all together. There is a 4th one that was declared by the Pakistanis not to be a Muslim. It was a Pakistani. So you have 3, 4, which is ridiculous. It's contributing absolutely nothing to this world. And other than the oil, which they are taking from the ground, they have no contribution to make to this world. And as a matter of fact, they should not kill other Muslims. They can kill non-Muslims. They tax non-Muslims. It's not a universal religion. It's a religion for the people who joined the Muslim religion. And again, it's a brotherhood. And the word Islam and Salam has the same roots. When they say we come in peace, no, you don't come in peace. You come in peace for other Muslims. You have no word that would mean peace to non-Muslims. You want to conquer the non-Muslim world. it's convert or die. So this is who we are dealing with. And as long as Germany, Europe, the United States do not really understand who these people are, it is not surprising that Trump is voicing what most people think. Let's see, what are we dealing with? How can it be that practically every terrorist is Muslim? Not all Muslims are terrorists, of course not. But every terrorist should be a Muslim. What is going on? This world has not yet put their heads together to understand what is going on.
So do you think that the new Polish government that doesn't want to bring any Muslims into Poland has the right idea?
Absolutely. You know, if you look at these people who come, you see mostly young men, healthy young men. If they are that unhappy, they should have an army and they should put some order into Syria and other countries. They shouldn't be just running away.
Let me ask you, you've done a lot to promote Jewish life in Poland, your native land. Can you tell us a little bit about that in these last years that you've worked to try to bring Judaism and revive it, even though it was decimated in the war, with the remnants of the people that are there? Tell us a little bit about what you've done to try to promote Jewish life in Poland.
Well, first of all, how did I come to understand that there would be room for Jews in Poland, or should be room for Jews in Poland? My father died in 1972. I went to Poland in 1972 to walk the streets he walked and visit the places he knew. What does a Jew do? He goes to a synagogue. He goes to where he can find other Jews. So in Krakow, I went to a synagogue, met a shamus, who informed me that there are no Jews, maybe 50, 60, all leaving or dying, that pretty soon there will be absolutely no Jews in Krakow. 1980, my father died, so my mother died, I mean. So again, I had a need to go to Poland, and although it was a communist country, passports, visas, and everything else, I made it again, and I went to see the same shamans who informed me again, there may be 80 or 100 Jews, and they're all leaving or dying. When I was informed that it might be a good time to retrieve some of our real estate that we owned before the war, I went back in 1993 and did retrieve some of the real estate that my family owned. And at that point, I met a lawyer for the sake of protecting the identity, who was recommended as the very best lawyer in Krakow. And let's assume his name was Krawiec, which would mean a tailor in Polish. I went to see him, cross behind at the reception area with Madonnas. It was absolutely like a Catholic chapel. After a while, when we went to dinner, the lawyer and I, he confided that he was Jewish. He was Jewish, his wife was Jewish, his family was Jewish. His grandfather was a rabbi. And he wanted me to take a package to a friend originally in Paris, because they couldn't travel while we as Americans could. And then on the package it said Mr. Schneider, Maurice Schneider, which means tailor, just like Krawiec means tailor, Schneider meant tailor, in a Jewish area of Paris. So I said, Schneider, Krawiec. He didn't react, but he eventually admitted that this was his brother who ran away from Poland. So this was a Jewish family. I asked him, how many Jewish families are there in the Krakow area that is hiding their Jewishness as they are, as his family is. And he thought for a while, and he said, over 1,000. So here the shamus, the concierge, if you will, the guardian of the Jewish community, tells you that there are 80 or 100. And here, if indeed there are over 1,000 families, I could easily count 3,000 hiding, still not daring to admit that they are Jews. And that gave me the idea that something needs to be done. So one came back again and again. In '95, I asked a friend of mine, a man who I befriended, if a Jewish fellow, head actually of the Home Office box, HBO, in Poland, if he knew any Jews, and he says, yes, I know some. So I asked him, why don't you get them together? He arranged for a cocktail in the Bristol Hotel. We met, and indeed he came with some 7 Jews, 2 of which were Polish Jews, Jews born in Poland, working in Poland, who admitted being Jews. The others were so-called expats, expatriates. They were American Jews doing business in Poland. And to this day, these 2 are members of Beit Warszawa, of the community that I founded. And so it has been 20 years. We have the synagogue, we have a rabbi, we have Shabbos and all the holidays, and we have a school for cantors, for lay cantors, and we have a school for children on Saturday, and we have a school of Judaism, which does educate some people in Judaism, and others are learning Judaism in view of a conversion.
So you established a Jewish synagogue in Warsaw, Poland.
Right. But from there on, the so-called Orthodox community felt compelled to also create a progressive Jewish synagogue. And thanks to us, we now find ourselves in at least 2 other cities, in the Trójmiasto, Gdańsk, Gdynia, Sopot, north of Poland, and Konstancin, a wealthy community some 20 kilometers from Warsaw, where they also have formed their own Jewish community. There are others in the making, so we hope that there eventually be a Jewish community wherever there are Jews in Poland.
And you're inviting many Americans and other travelers from other countries to visit Beit Warszawa and see it?
Oh, we want to entice them to do this, to understand, and also to help us. We cannot do everything by ourselves. We need support. We need moral support. We need financial support. We need PR. We need what communities need, support.
Many Jews were hidden and just realized in the second generation after the war that they were Jews, that they had Jewish family.
If you hired a dozen Hollywood writers and tried to imagine under what circumstances these people found out that they have Jewish roots, you couldn't imagine most of these circumstances. A man comes in, middle-aged, heartbroken. He just found out that he is Jewish. How did he find out? His father died. Before dying, he called him, the oldest son, his 2 siblings, and informed them that to this oldest son, he could not leave his land. He left him some other things, but not his land, because he's not his blood. So at 65, he learned that he was a Jewish child that was thrown at his parents, and his parents took him in and raised him as their own, but never told him. I mean, this is one example. And one man, it took 15 years to admit that, 15 years since I've known him, to admit that he was Jewish. One family took 14 years to finally admit that they're Jews.
Because they were in conflict with their regular family that were there.
What you have is so many, if you will, variables. A Jew married a non-Jew. The children realize that from their father or the Jewish partner, the Jewish part of the couple, they had no relatives. Or maybe there is a relative, I'm using an example, one living in Canada and the other one living in Israel. Strange. And then from the Catholic partner, he has 200 relatives. He starts thinking, how come? And finds out that one of his parents was Jewish. And it goes down to the grandchildren. There's then the allegiances and the alliances. How can the concerns, the fears, if he tells his neighbors that he's Jewish, how are they going to react? If he tells at work that he's Jewish, will they discriminate? Sometimes he did not tell his spouse or her spouse that she or he were Jewish. How can the spouse wanted to marry a Catholic?
But this is in Poland. Would this happen in the United States, something like this, or not?
It probably could happen. Whether it happens often, probably not. But it could happen, you know.
But this is a different culture.
Different culture, different world. So the different in the United States, we are able to express more courage than they can. They have no place to go. America is a big country. If you have problems in New York, you go to Chicago or Los Angeles or any other place. If you have a problem in Poland, where do you go?
So how many Jews live in Poland in your estimation today?
Poland has today 40 million, approximately 40 million people. We were about 9.5% of the population before the war, roughly 3 million, 3 million 4. Some 300,000 Jews survived. 350,000 Jews survived. If only 10% of the surviving Jews would be today 35,000. If less than that survived over the period of 3-4 generations, they multiplied. The State Department considered that there is between 25 and 30,000, 15 years ago, estimated that there is between 25, 30,000 Jews in Poland. There are probably Jews or people with a Jewish background, with Jewish roots. There are probably over 100,000.
What's your opinion of Holocaust deniers having experienced what you experienced?
Listen, it's so absurd that all you can do is declare them idiots, you know, or dishonest. You know, it's
propaganda.
Not only. Listen, maybe they don't want to believe it. It is so unbelievable that, frankly, I'm not surprised that some decent people, we call them Holocaust deniers, but it is so absurd that you cannot believe it. I mean, I can't even believe it happened.
But even after the war, we see the Tutsis and the tribes in Africa, 1 million killed, one for the other. We see it in Kosovo, we see it in Yugoslavia.
Listen, Cambodia, 2 million. 2 million people killed. No one does anything about it. I mean, we are cruel. Animals don't kill for the sake of killing.
Do you have hope for the world in the generations to come, Severyn, based upon what you've experienced, where you are today, and what do you think of the future of the human race?
Listen, we've been around for a few 100,000 years. Chances are, unless this earth is hit by debris from the cosmos and disappears, and then life disappears, that we'll be here in the next few 100,000 or million years.
Power with weapons and various kinds of elements that didn't even exist in World War II that can do more damage than...
Yes, but do you know what existed forever? Disease and hunger. And we were cut to pieces by disease and hunger for the last few 100,000 years. And we're still around. So if they kill half of the population in an atomic war, half will remain, 10% will remain and will regrow. So it would take a cataclysm to eliminate life on Earth. And then we would be another planet in this enormous world circling around without life. But as long as there is life, there should be life.
And so with all of the negativity you experienced and many of the positive things you experienced, you still leave at this point, at this moment, in a positive state.
You have to be. If we don't think that we will exist, why would we have children? Why would we have? Why would we continue to procreate and to leave behind some big monuments or small monuments that we create in this world, where our instinct dictates that we continue doing, that we procreate, that we add to the existence of this world.
Do you have any thoughts of the Jewish Museum that was just created in Warsaw to remember Jewish life in Europe from its earliest days?
Listen, any museum is wonderful. This is, in my opinion, a tourist infrastructure for the city of Warsaw or for Poland in general. Jews travel. Jews need places to visit. Maybe they will stay a night or two longer in Warsaw if they come to Poland. Or maybe they will come and visit Poland because of this museum. Will it help the Jews worldwide? Certainly not. Will it help some people to better understand in Poland who were and who are the Jews? Probably. Will they tell the truth? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. As long as the interests of the Catholic Church do not merge with the interests of the Jewish community in Poland, I'm not sure that we will be able to tell the truth and have the children, the students, the Christian devotees, the Catholics, who may not quite yet accept the Jews, to visit that museum. It will be difficult for the Catholic Church to accept all the truth that has to be dug up.
But aren't there visitors of all faiths going to see that museum today?
Well, remember, in order to make a difference, we cannot depend upon the tourists alone. That museum should be used for the children, for the Polish Catholic children, to understand, get to know, and want to befriend their Jewish neighbors. Until that happens, it will be just another museum.
One point, have you, I'm sure you have, or have you visited the camps in Poland, Treblinka, Auschwitz, Majdanek, in your life? And
too many times. I wanted my children to see it. I wanted my friends to see it. And last time I was at Majdanek with a friend of mine, and we both got sick. So I decided that I wasn't going to visit any of these camps anymore. We just got physically sick, whether it's the age or whether it's a better understanding what happened. But I decided that was it. I showed it to a few of my children. I went with them. I took some friends, but that's it. I'm not going to go back. It's too difficult.
Do you think it's important that Jewish and non-Jewish persons visit these camps?
These camps now have been, to a great extent, sanitized, except for Majdanek, which still has some horror instruments in place. All the other camps are just being described. In Auschwitz, there is very little left. Birkenau, huge space with some dynamited pieces of dynamited chambers. There's nothing really that you can walk through and see. Auschwitz has very little. And whatever horror is left has been sort of manufactured and sanitized. The shoes, the glasses, the luggage, the things that the dead have left behind them. But the horror of these camps is so unbelievable that the animal rights groups will not allow for animals to be tortured or not killed humanely or not treated humanely or not euthanized correctly. And yet what happened there was to humans cannot be understood. How do you take children and kill them, throwing them against the wall in front of the parents, which they did? How do you get people absolutely naked, throw them into a chamber, gas them, and burn them in an organized fashion? How do you do it? It doesn't penetrate the brain that you can actually do that. You could do it to a dog. Can you imagine the uproar that would, not imagine, when someone tortured an animal, all the newspapers write about it, that he actually tortured the dog or the two cats, or it is horrible. But look at the reaction when it comes to some pets. And here, 6 million. Half of them children and wives.